Hello and welcome to the Home Assistant Podcast. This is episode number 73. With a new release finally, it's 0.115 is finally here. As usual, I've got Rohan with me. Hey Rohan.
Hey.
We are very pleased to welcome once again Paulus.
Hey, how's it going?
This episode is sponsored by Home Assistant Cloud by Nabu Casa. Easily and securely access your local Home Assistant instance remotely for a small monthly fee that also supports the Home Assistant project. The configuration is done by the user interface, so there's no fiddling with router settings, SSL certificates, or any YAML.
Big release, and I think it's going to be a big episode, so people are probably going to want to have to speed up their playback on this episode. But first of all, today is Home Assistant's birthday. How old are we turning today, Paulus?
We're turning 7 years old.
Wow.
7 years ago was when the first commits landed on GitHub.
Crazy.
I mean, I was hacking on it before, right? But it's been, that was when I was like, okay, it's going to be open source.
A project.
Yeah, a project.
Yeah. So 7 years ago, you were just writing a Python script to automate those hue lights in your house, and here you are today, right?
Right.
Crazy.
Yeah, and now, now it's amazing, right? Like last year, we were in the 10th most active project on GitHub, and it's been
crazy.
So pretty much this whole year, the activity has been like way higher, I feel, than like previous years.
Yep.
We have like an overall open PRs, I think, around 350, 400. I think we've finally been able to make a small dent, but I think we have like in the last, and a PR of course is a pull request, a contribution on GitHub. And then I think, I'm just going to get the live stats right here. In the last 4 weeks, we have merged 1,312 contributions.
That's insane. Okay.
And have you seen, because obviously it's 2020, so we have the COVID pandemic, everyone's in lockdown around the world. Have you seen an increase or decrease in the contributions because of that?
We've seen an increase. I think people are spending more time at home, right? So they start to invest in their home or research how they can improve their home, right?
Yeah.
And so they end up quickly, like, at something like Home Assistant. But we've also seen people having more time to contribute. Maybe it's just less commute time that they can spend otherwise.
Yeah.
And so, we've definitely seen an uptick, and it's been just hard to like keep track of it, right? Like every contribution is great, but it also means that it takes our time, and we cannot spend our time on our own focus points where we want to take the project. So we always need to find this balance. But I think we've been doing really well, especially with like the month of What the Heck that we just did, which also got like a lot of people just like contributing things, but we'll talk about it later, I guess. It's been really good.
For sure.
That's awesome.
That's awesome. Yeah. All right. Well, I think before we get too carried away with you, Paulus, let's first get the bad news out of the way.
Yeah.
So another cloud strikes again. This time, it's the popular service IFT, if this, then that. They've decided that they are going to introduce a new pro subscription model, which will allow you to create unlimited applets, which is basically,
scripts.
Yeah, a script in there. However, moving forward, the free tier will be restricted to only 3 applets. So if you want to create any more than 3, you'll need an IFT Pro monthly subscription. I know, Paulus, you had some few words to say on Twitter about this, and I 100% agree with you. I know I logged into my IFT Pro account today. My IFT account today, and I saw I had 26 applets running. So I'm definitely already over the free limit. I'm quite cheesed off, to be honest, with this. What's your theories on this, guys?
Well, I think my theory is that running a cloud service to just offer these kind of things is just unsustainable. Whenever you hear about something is powered by the cloud, you always need to think, who pays for this cloud? How is this going to get paid, and how are we going to be able to, how are companies going to support this, right? Because there's 3 different ways a cloud can be paid for. It's either built into the original purchase price of a product, right? Which is kind of how If This Then That worked initially, because you bought a product and the manufacturer would pay IFT to offer automation services.
Right.
But that's also only as long as it goes, right? A lifetime, if you buy an $8 light bulb, you cannot expect a lifetime of integration or cloud service attached to it. At some point it's going to say no. So people always try to do this kind of pyramid scheme, right? They're selling more products and it's going to cover the cost of the old products. But of course, your cloud is just going to get more and more expensive because you're supporting more products in that cloud.
You're increasing your usage.
Yeah. So the second way to pay for cloud is of course subscriptions, right? This is what the model they're going to now. It's like pay monthly and then you can just use our cloud. And then the third, of course, is if your data is used for different purposes, right? So like a Google or an Amazon, it's like super cheap, but they are just learning about you and are able to send better advertisements.
Yeah.
To be honest, I thought that's what their original business model was. I would just assume that they would have all this data on what sort of technology people were using it and how they're integrating it with other things, and they would sell that to someone like Google or Amazon. So it's interesting that they haven't been able to turn a profit doing something like that.
Yeah, I wonder if they if there were certain limitations based on like the manufacturers that were offering their data or something.
Yeah.
And even I know there's been a pushback with privacy. GDPR, California's got their new privacy laws that have come in. So maybe the business model just went out the window.
Well, if this and that, even I think it was them that had this thing where Gmail had stronger privacy requirements for the API. And then if this and that said, oh, we cannot match that, we're going to drop Gmail support.
Wow.
Which is like wait a second.
That's a little bit scary. See, that's, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that the thing that is so annoying about this, which is what pisses people off, is that it wasn't clear that this was a subscription service or was going to be a subscription service, right? It was promoted as like, here's a free service and
the old bait and switch.
Yeah, we generally tend to think when we see a free service is that if people are going to charge for it, they're going to charge for something extra. They're not going to say, oh, you're invested in this ecosystem, now pay up to and hold you hostage.
Yeah.
People that pisses people off. Because there's so many choices. It's not like they are the only one. I mean, there's like Zapier and there's some other more. I mean, they're, I guess, more enterprise focused than.
Yeah, but you're right though, right? It's I think what it is, and even I think what the big uproar is about is just the fact that bait and switch almost kind of technique, right? Where it's fine if you say, hey, okay, you can now start doing X, Y, and Z on the platform, and then that's going to cost you extra, or advanced automations or something like that, right? And I think the biggest thing that just from reading Twitter and like Reddit and those kind of things, I think the biggest thing that people are cheesed about is, well, I had all of this, now you're taking it away from me, right?
Yeah.
And Phil, I mean, this morning when we were chatting, I think you had a similar.
Yeah, I barely log into IFT. I just logged in because I wanted to see what the subscription model was, right? Because I got an email about it, and it said, oh, by the way, you've got 26 applets. I don't know what half of them do, but they're obviously doing something in the background for me.
Yeah.
And now I'm losing them all, right? So yeah, it's taking it away from me.
Yeah.
Well, what we can hope is that a lot of manufacturers used IFT to avoid having to make an API.
Yeah.
So maybe, fingers crossed, manufacturers are going to open up an API and we get more information directly into Home Assistant.
Yeah.
And I think that's the only reason I've used IFT. I think it's when I have my Amazon Echo, the timers go off. There's an IFT action that can then send a webhook through to Nabu Casa. So, that's, a workaround for me. But we need those manufacturers to open it up to more than just IFT to be able to do those things.
But that's it, right? It's a workaround. It's not an actual requirement.
Yeah.
No,
if
the product was built better.
I didn't want to use IFT to do that, right?
Yeah.
So I guess this opens up the door to Home Assistant as well to fill in some gaps here. Like I'm sure there's a lot of integrations and using webhooks that Home Assistant can now fill in. Like, you can do automations and triggers based on a whole bunch of things coming in that Home Assistant can do now for you.
Yeah, and I think there's just over time from when IFT kind of started up to where we are now, I think there's a lot of stuff that Home Assistant has added on, right? Where, a lot more platforms as well. So they're, again, whatever you're using might actually already be on Home Assistant natively. So
exactly.
Just, you might need to refactor your automations or something like that or your actual system to do it. But
do we know what happens if you have Phil, you have two more than the 3 applets? Are they going to continue running, or are they just going to disable them all?
To be honest, I have no idea. I only found out that I had more than the free tier because the email I got was from IFT that said, create your own pricing. So clearly they don't even know how much to charge for IFT Pro, right? They're doing some price discovery in the market. They want people to put a price tag on it. And I just logged in to go, oh, what's this all about? And they just said, you've got more than 3. So there's no mention of what happens afterward. I haven't really delved into it. I got quite annoyed and closed the window, basically.
Yeah.
Rage quitted.
A lot of times the create your own pricing thing comes around because it's also, I forget where I read this, but there's this thing where it's, if you leave it up to you, you'll usually give more than it's worth.
Right.
So, again, I don't know that
they're trying to play some psychology.
Yeah, I don't know that that's the strategy, but it could be, right?
And maybe a conspiracy theory is COVID's around. Maybe they're not getting enough new devices being sold at the moment. Not a lot of manufacturers coming along to keep putting money into IFT. So they've got to branch out with a new business model.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I mean, I think if they also reached out to people and said, hey, listen, like we're struggling, help us out kind of thing, then if that was the case, right? And I'm sure people would come to that.
Well, so this is what Wise just did.
Yeah.
Right? I don't know if you've been noticing. I think they did it last week, where Wise is making super cheap cameras that are like cloud enabled, like $20, $25.
Yeah.
And it had like person detection. And now I think they used some product of some AI person detection on the camera, but that company got bought by Apple, and so they had no access anymore, and so they moved to a cloud-based person detection, and it's just super expensive because you're doing AI machine learning on like video, and so now they were like, well, if everybody paid $1.50, we can make it work, and like people are like, no.
Yeah.
Nah, that's not the product they bought, right?
It's almost the Wikipedia model, kind of, but just begging.
Pay us what you think we're worth.
Yeah.
Right.
So it is the month of what the heck. Well, let's start off, Paulus, with what is it? How did it come about? What's the whole gist behind it? Let's start with that.
Right. So it started off actually. There's a web framework called Ruby on Rails.
Yeah.
And they had May of this year, I think, or maybe last year. I think this year. They had May of what the F. In that month, it basically started, like, some people were like, why doesn't this work in Rails? Or why do I always have to do that? And they're like, okay, how many more annoyances are out there that you have to, like, we don't really have a good way to report annoyances. Mm-hmm. So in Rails, they were like, you have to submit logs and, all your versions of all your jams, you have to gather all this information. And so they were like, what if we put a super low barrier and then we see what like comes up? And I saw that, I was like, this is really cool. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Right? This is not something that we can always handle because it's so much like people chiming in, but we could definitely do it for a month. And so, so Frank organized this and we started this and it took off like crazy. So the idea is, if there's something that you think is weird about Home Assistant, mm-hmm. but it's not weird enough to open a bug request for or a feature request. One of the things that we saw was like, why can't the admin user change the password for other users?
Yeah.
And it's something like, oh, I guess we forgot to add that. Right? But right now, if you forget your password, you have to remove the user and add a new user back in.
Got it. Right.
So, and there was all these things. It was like, oh, we can actually quickly fix this. And so a lot of developers chimed in like fixing stuff because, we have a lot of developers around and they're mainly always like, scratching their own itch. They're working on their own stuff that they also use in Home Assistant.
Yeah.
But when they see all these things, if you know the code, some requests are like, oh, I can do that in like an hour or something. So then like people have been adding that. And so I think we had in total 66 contributions based on what the heck topics. Wow. And these have been fixes. We'll talk about them when we go over the next release. There's a lot of stuff for automations coming in, a lot of like, where you can pass in multiple times for like a time trigger. These kind of like changes are coming from all the what the hacks that have been coming in. And then if we look at the stats, it was a huge success. So there were in total 682 topics have been created as of today. We're still running, of course, till Thursday. We're recording this on the Saturday before. So there's still a few days left. We had, of those 682, 107 of those had accepted solutions. So we set up like, if the what the heck was either solved because it already could be done, or if we had like a fix for it in Home Assistant, then that was. So this is 1/6 of them all have been solved. And in total, like over 4,000 posts have been made.
Wow.
Like people commenting and these kind of stuff. So no, I think it was a really, really big success.
Yeah.
And this year, it was more. We didn't expect it to be this big.
Yeah.
Right. Like
I'm sure that for all of you guys, I'm sure you're all pretty tired now and can't wait for Thursday when it's finished up.
Right, but it's actually really bad timing because in October is always Hacktoberfest.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then we also always see a spike. So we need to now come up with new stuff to do during October.
Yeah.
But we'll figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah. Fair enough.
Well, this will be some good ideas for people that if they want to find out something that they can contribute, they can just go through that list and go, oh, yeah, that looks like a reasonable idea I can tackle.
Yeah, and so we've been gathering all this input on the forums. And so we're going to close this category, but we're going to, it will still be accessible. We're not going to hide it.
Yeah. Yep.
Which makes sense. Just lock it so that nothing new comes in there.
Yeah.
So if it's been so successful, will you run it again?
Probably, yes. But not this year. So probably next year. So I think we can make this a yearly thing.
Yeah.
If we do it too often, people, people need to be like, oh, if I already reported last time, I'm not going to write it again. So
Yeah. Yep.
if we do it too often, people are not going to write it down. So
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess you guys need to see your children at some point too. So that's
yes. Well, with the current pandemic,
yeah,
we
that's
see them a
true.
lot.
That's true. You see them enough now. But yeah.
All right. Well, 0.115 is finally here. So, Paulus, before we get started, it was delayed. Was there a reason for the delay? It was just you wanted it to be a bigger release, or there was features that you wanted to get into this release?
Well, we've been building some features that required alignment between the different parts of Home Assistant. So one is our Home Assistant tag feature, which I'll explain later what it is. But we've been working with Android, iOS. We needed the front end team. We needed the back end team. We needed people working with 3D printing. We needed people working with ESP Home, and all these people had to come together and be aligned.
Yeah. Right.
And so. Plus, of course, now it's on our birthday, so of course it gives us an extra push. But I do think that this release is too big. It's almost 2 releases, right? 5 weeks. Normally we have a 3-week release cycle.
Yeah.
And so even GitHub doesn't load when you look at the an amount of contributions because it's just too big, and it's just we need an extended beta period because we don't even know what is in this release anymore because some is so long ago, and so. We've been fixing a lot of bugs, but we're gonna keep it a 3-week cycle again. But for now, this was we need some polishing up, and it's our birthday, so it's all comes
Makes
together
sense.
very nicely.
Yeah. No, that's fair.
All right. Well, I think one of the biggest features to come in at 0.115 has to be the new media browser / media sources. Yeah. I've played with this. It's looking awesome. So basically, when I first saw Frank, he shared us some screenshots. It looked like a Spotify player inside Home Assistant where you could browse your own local media. And of course, it really ties together a lot of what Home Assistant does in that now you can select your own media and expose it or play it on media entities that are already exposed within Home Assistant. So it's really great. I've tested it with Sonos, with Plex. I believe Spotify is supported. There's a whole bunch of, for one release, there are so many sources that are supported. So really good job by everyone there. And works great.
Yeah, so this is also one of those projects, just like tags, where a lot of different contributors got together to build it. Mm-hmm. So initially it was JJ Lauren from Plex, who did the initial version to have the backend done so that we could browse your own Plex library.
Yeah.
And then Zach picked it up on the front end, and he made this beautiful media browser. You see all the album art in a grid and nice buttons. You can, certain. For example, if you see a grid of artists, you can just click play on an artist and it will start playing the artist. But you can also click on the artist and see their albums and what you expect from a Spotify or a media player. And so this started with Plex, and then CJ Toby, he added support for Sonos and Spotify and Kodi. But then there's this other contributor, Hunter, and he's been doing the streaming integration he did previously and the camera stuff.
Yeah.
And he was like, well, this media browser is great, but can we not tie it up to our own media? Instead of just having, browse Spotify and then have Spotify play something, we also have media players that can just play any URL. Like Chromecast can play any video or audio.
Right.
Sonos can play any audio. And so then we started looking, and so then Hunter figured out, like, can we have a local media folder that we expose through a media browser, and then when you pick on an item, we will send that URL to your Chromecast.
Okay.
So now all of a sudden we can, so we built this new media source integration, and so we actually didn't limit it to just folders. So local folders is one thing that like an integration can play. So if you go to Casa, you click on the media browser, it will actually show your local playable media that Home Assistant can then play on the Chromecast. But actually any integration can provide a media source. So for example, CJ Toby also added support to NetAtmo. NetAtmo is a cloud-based security system. And so now you can play your NetAtmo recordings of when there was movement on your Chromecast.
Cool.
That's cool.
But that was not it. So then we were like, well, what else can play media from a URL? The browser.
Yeah.
Right? So then Zach also built so that you can get the media browser to browse all the media sources, including NetAtmo and including local source. And then inside the Home Assistant UI, you can now also play that media.
On your local laptop or phone or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Wicked.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That is, it sounds like this was one of those things we were talking about where there's so many people that came together and just, somebody built this portion, somebody built that portion, and it worked out to this really slick integration, I think, right? It's that's very cool.
Yeah, so it looks super, super smooth. It works now, and like, it's been the beta was kind of cut too early. We still made some small changes, so like Bram and Martin have been polishing up some things, but now I think at this point, like we're getting ready for the release, and it's gonna be just such a game-changing feature, because it could mean, for example, that like, hey, if movement happens in your house, start playing like the latest video recording maybe on your TV or on your Chromecast video or like your Google Home Hub or these kind of things. Like we can start linking all this stuff together. Doorbell cameras, anything.
Yeah, which is awesome. And I mean, this really goes to show that, once you come up with something key like this, now it's so extensible, right? Where you can start using it in all kinds of different places. So we'd love to hear about, what people are doing and what are some weird cases that our listeners are using, right? Like, that are, I guess, not weird. It's not a good word to use. I guess just different and interesting, right? That's
unique,
that's what we live for here. So,
and the way it's all integrated is that, for example, if somebody would extend the Ring integration to provide its recordings as a media source, then immediately it will be available for any media browser, for any media player that can play videos by URL. So Chromecast will immediately offer, oh, you want to just watch Ring stuff? That's like,
cool.
It's all works.
Right. And then now you can start having that part of an automation or something like that. You're watching TV, somebody opens the door, triggers a camera, boom, your TV now cuts out to that camera, right? Whatever that looks like.
Yeah.
I pay $40 a year or whatever it is to Amazon/Ring, and I still can't get live video from them, from my video doorbell. Like, frustrates me.
I have an Echo Show and I have it, and it's, it comes up for, I don't know, a minute, and then
2
goes
seconds
away, and
whatever,
it's just like, I wish I could just. To me, that's more useful than just looking at the stupid background. It's like, hey, say this, tell me a joke. Like, it's like, I don't care. Like, I know, I've owned my Echo long enough to know what it does.
Call friends and family. I know how like the Amazon Echo works, right? Don't remind me.
Yeah, exactly. So, but that kind of stuff is useful.
Rant over.
Yeah. Next, tags. So there's now tag support. This is also huge.
I think we touched on this because of it was in the Android app in our last episode. And we had some ideas, but now, so there's physical. So Paulus, you'd have to run us through this because this obviously combines, as you were talking before about all these different people coming together. But what are these physical tags that you've got here?
Well, maybe I don't have my good pitch ready. So tags are like small microchips that contain an identifier, and certain tags you can also write data to, which you can add your own identifier. And so the most common tag that we know is NFC, right? So you have these small NFC tags. They don't have any battery, but with the signal you send to them to read them out, they can generate energy to send a response back. And that's how your phone can hover these tags, or like wireless payments works in a similar way, right? There's no battery in your credit card.
Yeah, exactly.
And so these tags are cool. And, 2 years ago, they kind of got on my radar because there was this video put online of somebody that had like all these printed cards with like album covers on them and like
the Magic Cards project.
Yeah. Well, the Magic Cards actually came after that video. So that video was the original one. And, he had this like 20 cards on his table, and he could tap them to the side of his table, and then his living room started playing that music. It was just super cool, right? Because like we're all nowadays, when we're playing something, we either have to say the exact album name to like our voice assistant. You use your phone, and you gotta like browse, and so this is annoying.
And then you play some random remix that doesn't work, you didn't want to listen to.
Or and it's also not accessible to like guests, or not accessible to kids, or people that are just not easy, cannot use phones easily. And so this card stuff is great because you can just pick up a card and it will play. And so then but that setup and that video was kind of like complicated. It had like a designated Raspberry Pi, an RFID reader. And then you had to like run some scripts on this Raspberry Pi, send it to Home Assistant. And so then Maddox made Magic Cards. Magic Cards was like a UI, and you still needed a Raspberry Pi and an RFID reader. But at this point you had like a nice UI, and you had like some templates to make it easy to print the cards and manage your cards. But I always felt like this should be an Home Assistant. Like it's silly that people would need like their own Raspberry Pi, like do all this like setup to just scan tags, and also all the management should be in Home Assistant, right? Because you don't want just music, you want maybe automations, like we shouldn't like push you in a direction. But of course, this also means that like, well, how did you make like alternative scanners, for example? And so that idea was always like in the back of my mind. And so then somewhere around earlier this year, I would say April, I was talking to Adorno on Twitter, and we were playing with ESP Home. And so with ESP Home, of course, this is like it's a open source firmware for microchips, right? Like the ESP8266. For people unaware, ESP8266 is a super cheap chip from China that you can program with your own software on it. With cheap, I mean like $1, $2 or something.
Yeah, it's crazy.
But it has Wi-Fi, right? So it's super cool because you can run your own code, and then with Wi-Fi actually send that data to Home Assistant. So these devices you can put anywhere in your house. So Andrea was able to run an ESP8266 running ESP Home connected to like an NFC reader, and all of a sudden we were able to, for like a fraction of the price of like the original setup, have like scanners that can send data to Home Assistant. And so then we were like, this is super cool. We should do something with it. And so we both ordered stuff from China to like get playing with this. But of course it takes 2 months, right? So this is like...
Right.
And so by then, of course, when it finally came in, we continued hacking on it. But around that time, without any coordination, 2 PRs got opened. One for Android and one for iOS, to scan NFC tags.
Okay.
So to add official NFC tag support, because this is something that, iPhones have had NFC for a long time, but they didn't open up the API to app developers.
That's right.
Android actually had NFC and opened up to app developers.
Yeah.
But now Apple's open and Android's open, and so now both of the Home Assistant official apps have NFC support, as you guys mentioned also in the last release. Yep. And so you can read tags and you can write tags. And so when you write a tag, we write like a URL to it. that is actually a fake URL. It's like homeassistant.io/tag/unique identifier.
Okay.
And then when the official apps read those URLs, they know, oh, this is a tag. So we don't actually, we don't visit that website, we just send that identifier from the URL to your Home Assistant instance.
And then that does whatever trigger.
Does whatever.
Yeah.
So now we had 3 data sources coming in with tags, right? So we have Android sending tag ID, we have iOS sending tag IDs, and we have these like ESP Home scanner devices sending tag IDs.
Right.
So now the next step was, how can we make it so that users can easily find the tag IDs and automate them? Because in the past, you would have to like listen for the event. So you go to the dev tool, you have to find the event, you send the event, write down, and it's just cumbersome. This is not the kind of experience that we would like to have when people automate these tags. So Brom has built like a beautiful UI for this. So there's a new tags UI. Every tag that you scan will be automatically added to this UI, and so that you can give them a name. From this UI, you can also see if a tag is being scanned, it will like glow.
Yeah.
So you know, oh, that is the tag I'm scanning right now, so you can easily find it. We also went one step further where the front end integrates back into our mobile application. So if you create a tag through the front end, there's now also a write tag button. So the website can trigger writing the tag ID to an NFC tag.
Yeah.
So when you're managing it on your phone, you see all your tags. You can say, oh, I want to write this one to an NFC tag. You tap the NFC tag and it contains that identifier. And then we have also added buttons to easily, just like with one click, create an automation. So it will open the automation editor. It will have the tag selected. There's a new trigger called tag scanned. And so then you can do any automation you want.
Cool. So so I'm just looking at the little screenshot you posted in our show notes, Paulus, and that's a little robot there for the automation. I was going to ask about that. Okay.
Yeah, and so bringing this all together, like it actually, you know, the cool thing about mobile phones is that anyone can get started with NFC for pretty much nothing, right? Like buying NFC stickers, you can get them online for like, if you only want 10 or 20, it's like maybe $1 per sticker, but the price goes down, like lowers if you buy more in bulk.
Yeah,
and,
totally.
But phones are cool. But I mean, I'm really in love with these scanners, because these NFC scanners that you can put through your house, they're actually static, they're fixed, right? You don't move them around. Like if I tag with my phone, I'm scanning a music album, how does Home Assistant know which room I am and where the music has to play?
Right.
But these NFC scanners that are with ESP Home, they're just fixed. They're just in my living room. They're in the lounge. And so if I scan a tag there, it knows, Home Assistant can know, I need to play this on this media player.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so to make these scanners more appealing, because like if you just have these chips, it doesn't look very nice. So Andrea has also designed a new a case for these scanners. So it's a beautiful, like, it's kind of the size of a credit card, but then like, I would say like half a centimeter thick or something like this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you put like you power it with a micro USB cable, and then you just put them anywhere in your house, and then, of course the card on top just scans it. But it looks really nice. So there's like 2 designs, and the pictures will be in the show notes, and there will be a blog post about it later as well.
Yeah.
So in terms of how do I get that? So I don't own a 3D printer. How does one acquire something that, like, they look amazing? How does one? Are someone going to sell them? Or
meet Paulus in the back of a parking lot, and
Now, so Andrea is gonna like publish these designs, so you could go to a 3D print shop, maybe locally in town.
Yep.
He's also gonna sell a bunch of pre-assembled scanners.
Nice.
So he got some of the components just to like, he's gonna do like a small run of like 20 just to see if there's any interest. I think there's will be gone in no time because, for example, I don't like soldering, and I don't have a 3D printer, right? I just want this to be done for me.
Yeah.
So
exactly, right.
I think there will be many
I'm
people like me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but we'll see. So that's gonna be, he's gonna sell them as well, and I think it's gonna be really cool because if we all start doing these cool stuff with tags, it's just It will be awesome.
Yeah. Now we're gonna have to integrate another marketplace for these physical tags. It's a Home Assistant's version of Etsy for just selling cases.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I've been thinking about this kind of things more and more. It's that with ESP Home, it's really easy to build like these kind of one single purpose, like very specialized purpose chips, and like with 3D printing build a case around it, or have like just some cases mass manufactured. But we don't have to rely on hoping some manufacturer makes a product that we like and allows us to put our firmware on it to make sure that it's local. Like we should be able to do this ourselves. And I think something like what Andrea is doing here is really cool. And I really want to like promote this also, because I want more people to start creating and selling these kind of devices.
Yep.
And the way it works now with ESP Home is like it's the same kind of experience as you have with like setting up a Chromecast or a Google Home Mini. So you connect it to the power. It will not be able to find the Wi-Fi that it knows. It will become an access point. You connect to the access point. You configure the internet. Then the moment it has internet, it will immediately pop up in your Home Assistant saying, "Hey, I found an ESP Home device. You want to set it up?" You click yes, and it works. That's it. Yeah,
which is
like that's just
it's a no-brainer. Like it just makes sense, right?
Yeah.
I agree, and I would love to see more people doing this kind of stuff. So Andrea, you started a revolution.
It's also nice to bring the physical world into automation. Right.
Well, I think this is what makes this will add like a new dimension, I think, to Home Assistant.
For sure.
Right? Instead of like these, automations or these cool things we can do with our phone, these are the kind of things that the other family members are easily going to be able to show their friends. Like, look how cool.
Yeah.
And it's very easy for everybody to understand as well. It's like, oh, I scan a card, something happens.
Yeah, exactly.
And so the one thing that we haven't built yet, and just because we ran out of time, is actually the jukebox. Like that whole, having media players mapped to scanners mapped to media players, tags mapped to like audio. So I've created a YAML automation, so I'm gonna release that one, so people can just copy paste that in, and it will work. But my ideal world, it will be in the tag UI. You should be able to assign songs to tags right there with our new media browser, right? We bring that together. And then we can see, we know which devices you use for scanning. So we can also allow you to assign media players to each scanner.
Okay.
And then it will pretty much just work.
So therefore, you scan the Daft Punk, card on the living room scanner, it will know to play that album in the living room.
Exactly.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, so I had this kind of system in my house for like 1.5 years now, and the main user of the system was actually my son. So I had all these cards initially with just children's songs. Each card was one song each, and since my son was 1 year old, he has been able to do his own music.
That's awesome.
In the living room, right?
Yeah.
And so he would pick his favorite card and just swipe it, and it would play. Initially, I used to play it on like a Google Home. Later, I played it on like a Sonos device. And he just taps it. And later, he evolved from like children's songs. He wanted car sounds. So it has like a police sound, the ambulance, the fire.
I'm sure that doesn't get annoying at all. That's funny.
So yeah.
That's cool.
So yeah. But I've also heard people that have put like NFC stickers on books.
Yeah.
So you can scan the book, and then somebody will start reading that book. Like they would have like recorded the voice of the grandparents. So the kids will scan the book, and the grandparents will start reading, and you hear like a ping when to like turn the page and these kind of things.
Oh, that's cool. So it's nice, like again, especially in a time like COVID, or if they've passed on or whatever, that's a really cool like legacy, right? Like, and just, hey, here's me recording something like that, right? So that would be really cool. All right, we are 42 minutes into, and we've gotten through 2 features.
Not even halfway there.
But these are the biggest features.
Oh, I love it though. They're worthy of an episode themselves, I think, right? So
yes.
All right. So This one I think we're gonna have to try and explain this as best we can over audio. But variables in scripts and automations are here. Paulus, run us through this. Just if you can, give us the abridged version.
So in automations and scripts, we can use templates to write conditions, to dynamically define when the script is executed, which service to call, or what data to send to the service. Like you can, for example, dynamically decide what the message is going to be in a notification that you're sending. Like, you left the garage door open, or the garage door has been open for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, right? You need to calculate those times. Yeah. But we do a lot of these calculations, and it's sometimes annoying to do that in line in where you're defining the message for your service, because all of a sudden you're mangling. You have, your data property for your service call, and it has just these hundreds of lines of automation, hundreds of lines of templates, and you also cannot reuse template variables. If you compute it like a value, and you need that value 3 times, and it's in different parts of they're in different templates, you would have to calculate it 3 times, and then it's difficult to keep in sync, and it became messy.
Yep. I have a good morning Jarvis message every morning, so it reads me the traffic, the weather. It's just a big block of template, right? It's messy. It's hard to, if I'm not at work one day and I need not that sentence to say, I need to make sure it maps up. It's difficult, right? So this is going to be a lifesaver.
Yeah, and so the way it works is that there's 2 new parts. The first part is that when you define a script or an automation, there's just a new, besides alias, trigger, condition, and action, you can now also define variables. Right. These variables will be data that will be available to you inside your template. So this can either be just hard-coded information. So for example, in my tag jukebox automation, I will have a mapping of all the tag IDs to the songs that they need to play. And that's just one variable.
Right.
But you could, for example, also in these variables compute data based on the trigger that happened and have that data be available to test in your conditions or later in your actions. But we realized that sometimes you want to have stuff in your variables, but you can only compute them after all the conditions pass, because you know that certain data is available. Yeah. For example, you cannot read the brightness of a light if it's not on. So if you want to do computations with the brightness, you cannot have that done in the initial variables.
Right.
So we decided to also add a variables action to the script syntax. So the action part of an automation and the script of a script, it is the same kind of syntax, right? It's the same call, service, fire, an event, delay. And so there's a new variables there, where again you can just define key and value, and it will assign those values to those variables, and those will be available in the subsequent templates rendered after the variable block.
Okay.
So this sounds pretty that variable action sounds a bit why would you use this? And the actual use case for that comes in the next feature, another new feature that we added, which is called wait for trigger. So with wait for trigger, you can pause a script or automation that's being executed halfway and wait for an automation trigger to happen before you continue with the rest of your actions. Right. And the data from that trigger is then also available to you. And so the use case we've had in mind when we designed and developed this feature is actionable notifications to our mobile applications. So for example, you have an automation that detects that you've left the garage door open for 20 minutes. You then go ahead, send an actionable notification to your mobile phone saying, you've left the garage door open. Yep. Do you want me to close it? Yes or no? Then you wait with the wait for trigger until the answer comes in from the mobile phone, that the user clicked one of the 2 buttons. And when the answer comes in, that same automation can then also execute based on what the answer was, using a choose, which we introduced in 1.14. Yeah. And so that way you can keep all the logic of that automation, of asking you if the garage door should be closed, and then handling that answer all in one automation.
Yeah, that's going to save so much YAML.
Yeah, I think that like we're gonna, the people that like, if you write your automation in YAML, I think with all the new features that are landed last release and that are landing in this release in automations, people can just, probably end up cutting the automations like 50% of the more compact and doing the exact same thing, if not better.
Yeah. Because before you would have you had one automation block, and then from there you somehow trigger something or call another automation block, and then whatever it is, and not only does it get messy, it just gets very complex, right? So again, thinking of somebody who's not a programmer or something like that starts to get really cumbersome, right? If you want to do something a little more advanced. So now, and speaking of, actually, Paulus, does this translate to the automation UI as well, or how does that?
So I don't know how many of these things have already been translated to the UI. Yeah. Variables have not yet. I know that for sure. But the other thing, I mean, we're gonna make them available in the UI. But as these features go, it's always easier to, the UI is something you can add later as well. Yeah. So we'll be expanding our UI as well. But the variables one will be very difficult because in YAML you can define lists, you can define dictionaries, you can define numbers and all that stuff. Yeah. We don't want to build a whole UI to mutate arbitrary data structures. Because that's going to be kind of crazy. Well, I mean, I never say never. Maybe somebody will do it, but I don't think that's going to happen. I think that's so. There's some things will just be YAML only, but what we've been doing in the front end, if we come across like an action or part that we don't know how to render in the UI, we've actually been showing YAML blocks. So, for example, we don't just say this is something you can like. We used to just show you like a formatted version, like this is the data that we have for this trigger, but you cannot edit it from the UI. And we've updated that you can actually edit the YAML of just that one action or that one condition or that one trigger in the UI. Okay. And then the rest is still UI itself, but you can also toggle saying, I just want to edit this in YAML as well.
Okay.
Nice.
So this is something we've actually taken from Lovelace, because in Lovelace we started doing this. Yeah. Right? Like every card or entity row, you don't have to use the UI. You can still do individual YAML editing.
Yeah, just for that one card or one whatever.
Exactly. Yeah. Which actually brings me to another feature that is coming, and that is we no longer sort the keys when you edit YAML in the front end. So it used to be that this is only for UI users that are using YAML mode, but we had this feature, well, it was not a feature, it was a bug. It was that we store everything in JSON in the backend, right? So even if we show you YAML to edit in the front end, because that's what our users are familiar with, we would store it as JSON. And what used to happen in the past is that we would sort the keys alphabetically. And so even though you have it, this is super annoying, because if you think about it, in automation, you want trigger, condition, action. That's how you want to read it. Yeah. Because that's how it's going to execute.
Yeah, but it'll be action, condition,
But if you are going to alphabetically sort it, then condition comes first, and it's super annoying. Yeah. And the same started happening with like Lovelace cards and all that stuff. So that is fixed now as well.
Oh, that's good.
And this is, by the way, also something that came out of the month of What the Heck.
Yeah.
So wait for triggers, Paulus. Do they have a like default timeout action as well? Like I know, for example, the wait templates and all that used to. Is that also supported? Like if no one presses yes or no for 20 minutes, what happens?
Yeah, so there is a timeout. And then it will just continue, and then you have to look in the template to see if it was a timeout or not. I think. Right. I'm actually not 100% sure. I'm trying to quickly look up the code right now.
If not, you'll have to build it before we release this episode.
That's right.
With both types of waits, it is possible to set a timeout after which the script will continue its execution if the condition event is not satisfied. Timeout has the same syntax as delay, and like delay also accepts templates. You can also get the script to abort after the timeout by using the optional continue in timeout and set that to false.
Right. Okay. So yeah, the same feature support is perfect.
Yeah.
That's good.
That's awesome.
Something that's going to, I think, really help out people. I know I've had to use a lot of templates to achieve this, is triggers and conditions on entity attributes. So, for example, if you've got the sun and you want to do an automation based on the elevation, previously you would have to use a template to extract the value out. Now you can just use YAML only and do whatever you want with them. So that, I'm guessing that sounds like that would have had to come from What the Heck, surely.
Yes.
That
came out from there as well.
Yeah.
Because that's frustrated me for quite some time.
Yeah, well, it frustrated me as well, right? Like, it was just something that I just, because it's so easy. Right? It's just so easy to whip up like a template sensor that it's like, I'm not gonna fix it in the code.
Yeah.
But now it's
perfect.
Yeah, now this is gonna. I think, like, if we talk about like how people are gonna have less YAML after this is gonna kill a lot of template entities, template sensors.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And again, I've got a bunch too, right? And it's just another thing to do now, right? It's so which is I'm happy about this one as well. So improved template tracking. I honestly really don't even understand this one, so I'm not even gonna try it. So Paulus.
So this is actually. It has been interesting. This feature has been worked on and has been part of the code base for a long time, but it's been finally finished and wrapped up.
Okay.
And what this feature does is that previously, like when you have a template entity, we need to know when we need to re-render the templates to make sure that we pull in the latest information. Right. If we do it the inefficient way, is that we would, every state change, we would re-render every template. But that gets very expensive very fast. So what we used to do is that we would use a regular expression to kind of see which entities you would reference, and that's when we would update your template. But of course, this is not foolproof, because you can iterate over states, you can iterate over domains, you can... and so what happened is that the templates wouldn't update often enough, so the entities. And so we offer this entity ID feature that people could just manually assign entity IDs when their template entities had to re-render. And that was just, that was kind of silly, because now we're putting the burden on the users to understand how template re-rendering works, and, be able to then decide what the re-render state changes have to be that the entity had to listen to. And so with this improved template tracking, what is happening is that we actually keep track of all the domains and entities that are touched in your template. Let's say you just check, is a certain value of a sensor above 20, right? Then we now see, after the template has run, okay, you only reference this one entity. So then when that entity changes, we will re-render your template.
Okay.
Now, of course, it can happen that you have an if-else condition in your template, and inside the if or the else, you would reference other entities.
Mm-hmm.
But because we check it after each render, we can see, this time we know that if you only reference it one entity, when that changes, we'll re-render. If the next time you reference two entities, now we know we will re-render your entity when either of those two entities change.
Got it. So it's not just arbitrarily re-rendering it. It's basically re-rendering that template based on some logic of, hey, you're actually using this, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so we're also, like, not just entities, but we can also see if you, for example, iterate over the person domain to see who's home, to generate a list, then we know you're interested in the person domain. And so any change to an entity inside the person domain will then also trigger a re-render.
Got it.
Yeah, and because of this, we did have to make a breaking change where we decided we no longer support the entity ID feature, because we're now so good in figuring out what is going on.
Got it.
So, and that's something I'm just going to point out. I don't necessarily agree with. I know I use template sensors a lot, and I've got used to specifying the entity ID. And I think I saw a post when it was announced in the forums, that we're removing the entity ID feature, and I saw one of the comments was, if we don't detect the entity ID properly, there is a workaround. You can do like a variable hack or something like that. Was it absolutely necessary to remove the entity ID option? Was that adding overhead, just keeping it around, or?
It was not. It was making it more complicated because of the way we are tracking the entities that we have to re-render. it can still be done with some extra overhead. But in the end, it was like, this is not something that it was a hack pretty much why it was in the system. And I think if people want to control when they want to update things, they can also just, the update entity service call will also re-render, right? There's like other options to do that as well.
It is what it is. Yeah, I think now that template sensors, because I know you've, as part of this release, there's also the new service to update all the template sensors inside your YAML. You don't have to restart Home Assistant anymore. I think that'll help out a lot. And I think that update entity service, will just have to be the way it moves forward.
But like, what do you have a use case where you want to control when an entity updates?
Yeah, so I can't think of the one off the top of my head, but I'll have like a sensor that's completely like similar to like a time, right? Like it's based on date or something like that, but I can have it controlled based on like a calendar entity or something like that, or whatever else. It doesn't necessarily match up, but I do like the ability that if this entity updates, then this sensor knows to update for whatever reason.
Well, I mean, if it's related to an entity, that would just work.
Yes, yeah.
And and if you look at like, sometimes people will look at like, the time, like just doing like a now and then say like, if it's like 30 minutes past something, that's something that then you have to like manually update it, because we don't know if you use the time, we don't know what it means. Right? Like we cannot like automatically find it. So some people have been in the past, they were using like they had like a time entity that just updated every second.
So I have one that matches like, I think on the day of the week. So if it's Mondays, it knows, all right, now check if it's what week the rubbish is, right? If it's recycling or green waste. So now I'll probably just have to change that to, just use a trigger every night, 1 a.m. if it's Monday.
You could use the weekday sensor. We have like a...
yes, I could actually.
And then it just updates once a week. Boom.
There you go. Boom. So solve the issue right there.
It's live troubleshooting with Paulus.
Well, I think we've seen a couple of things come up during the beta in the chat, and all the time we've been able to offer a better written template that did not have these issues.
Yeah, that's fair. And I think that's a good plug for the chat too, right? At that point, is the community forums, the Discord. Again, if these are things you're struggling with, then that's the resources are there. People are there to help. The community's fantastic. I know I've gone in and gotten help quite a few times, right? So it's, you're right? There might be a better way of doing things, right?
Yeah.
But something I'm glad to see is the removal of the data_template, service_template. I can just put in my templates wherever I want now. Like put in the data.
Yeah.
There it is, right? Really frustrating. So many times I have been looking at my automations and going, why isn't this working? And then I realized, I'm using a template and I haven't done data_template. And that was my issue, right?
That used to happen to me like almost weekly at some point.
Yeah.
So that's that's a good is that a breaking change, Paulus, or is that just a change?
It should not be breaking.
Okay. Eventually I'm guessing it will be.
No, well, so data_template, they're just still supported, but they just treat it as data. So it used to be that we take data and then we would render data template and we would merge that into data. And so we do the same thing now, but you don't have to. I mean, if you just don't define data template anymore, you'll be fine.
Okay, beautiful. That's all I needed to know.
Yeah. So this is also something that came out of Month of What the Heck, and it was, we looked into it like, is this, why was it done initially? It was just for performance reasons.
Yeah.
But we were now able to do it in quite a performant way. So we're like, let's do it.
So how do you detect like when you need to run it through a template engine or not?
So Jinja has only 3 sort of like tags that when you see those, it's like a Jinja rendering. So it's the 2 times a curly brace. It is a curly brace %sign, or it's a curly brace hashtag for comments. So
right.
We just look for those 3 combinations of two characters, and if we do, then we know it's a template, and then we will render it. And a lot of times, if it's just a number, then YAML has already converted it to a number.
Right.
Anyway. So we know, so only if it's a string and we find those characters, it will be run through the template system.
Got it. Brilliant.
And so there's another change there as well, is that you can now specify templates for keys.
Yes.
So for the listener, a key is the entity ID or media content ID or like brightness. Yeah. So now you could say this is either brightness or, well, maybe actually a color, like color XY or color different like color types or something.
That's neat.
You know what would be really cool if you could control, and this is what the choose block has been for my replacement, but being able to specify in a template like that this key should not be added. For example, like when I want to dismiss a notification on my app, I have to do a choose block because I don't need to render the message and all that. I just need to do a dismiss one. So I'll add that to what the heck.
Yeah, that's right. Before Thursday.
It's not too late. Yeah, well, I've thought about like what would be the way. And I think for entity ID, we actually allow that you can specify none, and it will like render nothing. It will just target nothing, because otherwise people kept having warnings saying like, "Hey, you're pointing it at a non-existing entity." We should consider something like that maybe also for keys. Like if a specific value is like
nothing.
Ignore or something, but it has to be a special ignore. You can't just have the text ignore because that might be actually useful for something.
That's where it gets tricky.
Yeah.
So. Yeah. All right, moving on. This one I actually really like. The logbook panel gets some more information. So, now you can kind of see which automation or what script caused the change of a state and what action was used to do it, right? So, which I think is really nice. Just especially when you're troubleshooting or a light randomly turns off when you're working and you're like, why? Right. So
yeah. Also love that it's in the more info dialog as well. So if you click on like a more info dialog for an entity, down the bottom where it used to have like the little history graph, it's now there'll be like a little timeline of, this light turned on at this time or from this automation or whatever. It's really awesome.
Yeah, Zach has been doing such a good job in doing nice little tweaks like this throughout the UI.
Yeah, and I know there was a comment on this one on Twitter. Why is it change behavior of clicking on an entity on 0.115? Show the history graph again, not the data that was already visible before clicking.
So we're going to change this in the beta right now because we got some feedback where like certain entities do not have controls, right? Like sensors. And all of a sudden you had to click on the history tab to see the history. But if you click on a sensor, you might just want to see the history right away. If you click on a light, you don't want to have extra space being taken off by the history of the light. And so that's being put in the history tab. So you actually split that out. If it's a read-only entity, sensor, binary sensor, it will, or if it's like a limited control, like input boolean, then the history will be on the first tab of the more info. If it's like a light or a cover or all this stuff, it will be or switch. The history will be in a tab, so you have to click to show like the logbook and the graphs.
Got it. Okay.
And there's a new calendar card for Lovelace. That's nice to see. That'd be very handy. I think I've seen some attempts at maybe some mock-ups of a Lovelace calendar card elsewhere, but it's good to see an official calendar card making their way into Lovelace.
Yeah. Another really nice one that I like is rearranging the sidebar icons. I know this is one of those little things that people might be like, who cares? This is just the biggest, like if you're used to doing something a certain way and, you change some things around, you can always move it around. You can always clear stuff out. There's a bunch of stuff in there that I don't use today. Right. I think that's a really nice one.
So this is also something that came out of the month of what the heck. So, Bram saw that and he was like, I should be able to like get this going. And so right now, this is just the initial version. So this initial version stores your preferences in the browser or app where you're using it. So it doesn't if you modify it on your desktop, it doesn't modify what you see on your phone. Which one could also consider a feature because there's certain panels, like I will never open Visual Studio Code on my phone, but on my desktop I use it all the time, of course. So it's actually good that it's like split out, but I can see how people might want to change it, for example, for their other family members that use the app to just be able to hide some stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's something we'll explore for the future as well.
That's awesome.
And uploading avatars is now supported for users of Home Assistant too. That's a nice little feature. I'm surprised that wasn't on the original like when users came out originally.
Yeah, the original time when Person was introduced, it was like very MVP. And so this is something that has been like on the to-do list like for a long time, and we finally took the time to do it. It's actually a bit more complicated, right? Because you need to, like, you upload a photo, then you can crop it in the front end to make it like the nice size, or like to adjust it. Then when it gets sent to the back end, we store it, but we also generate thumbnails for you. That way, that like when you upload like your 4 megabyte photo that your phone produces, we're not going to show that in the UI, right? We actually resize it because we know that we always show your picture in a very tiny thing.
Which makes sense.
But now that we have this whole infrastructure in place, this is only the first application. So we've been thinking allowing uploading pictures for devices. So for example, you can have each device, you can upload a photo of how it looks. In the future, I even want to actually allow people to share this back to the community, right? Because like we don't need like 10,000 people to upload a photo of their U-bulb, right? Like one person could do it, and then all the other people could get it.
Right.
Exactly, yeah.
And then the other part where we want to see in the future people upload pictures is for their headers and footers in Lovelace, or for your picture elements card, or anything in Lovelace where you need pictures. Now people go to the www folder and upload stuff, and they have to use standby shares and whatever. And that's all too complicated. Like we could offer a UI for this.
Yeah. Yeah, cool. and I think that's a very good idea, right? So, more YAML reloading. So there's a bunch of stuff to list out, but it's now possible to reload more integrations and more YAML entries and all that stuff without having to restart Home Assistant.
Yeah. So this also came out of the month of What the Heck. And so Nick picked this up. Nick has been the one who's doing a lot of the performance improvements recently, and he also did the logbook.
Yeah.
And so he came up with a way to add YAML reloading. So we had YAML reloading for a bunch of integrations.
Yeah, automations. And
but
stuff.
those were already, but these were all integrations that were already migrated to the more modern version of how we are doing like data storage, that we can offer both a UI and a backend.
Yeah.
Like automations, input boolean, these kind of things. But he was able to find a way to add this to the old way, how we're defining sensors, for example, templates, like, you just define it under like sensor platform template. And so by offering this, like once he did it for one integration, it was like, wait, now we can easily add it everywhere. So he already added it to the ones that were most requested inside the What the Heck topic. And for Hacktoberfest, we're going to make a list of all the other integrations that exist that could also benefit from this, and just have like, people do it during October.
That's cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so this can be added to any integration that is internal, right? So it cannot be added to, I guess it can be added also to other integrations of like Philips Hue or something. But for that one, we just reload the config entry. But this is all for things like the Bayesian sensor, the derivative sensor, the template sensors, these kind of things.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome. That makes sense.
I think I won't have to restart Home Assistant until the next release.
But that's the future.
Yeah.
That has been like the goal for a long time, of course. But I think we're getting really close now.
Yeah.
I've just thought of another thing I want to add to What the Heck. Why do my sensors, like when I restart Home Assistant, all my doors and all that go now open for like 1 minute, right? Like 1 minute ago they were closed.
So I've explored this. This was actually a What the Heck, right? And I've been looking into it. So like, can we restore the state that this last happened? And so when it comes to doors, actually, they could like, there's two different groups of entities. Right, it's the group that actually can talk to the device. If we can talk to the device, we know when it was actually last opened, and we can restore the state. For that one, we could set something in the past. But the problem is, that only works during the startup phase of Home Assistant. Because if we start right now, when a state changes, every listener assumes the state has changed right now. That's why I'm getting called.
Right.
But if a state change event would happen, but the state happened last week, then it would still fire all the automations and it would go really bad.
Yes.
And so with reloading, this becomes really tricky because, for example, a lot of people use input booleans to like control their automations when something last run, etc. But that becomes really tricky. Like if you would reload your input booleans while you're running Home Assistant, you would want it to restore the old state of the input boolean.
Yeah.
But that's not possible because then when we reload, we actually remove all the entities and then add them back. And so then we would add an entity back with an old state, which would then still trigger all your automations probably. Yeah. So it's something we need to figure out more or better how this could be done. And it might be that because we already have some more advanced reloading features. So if you reload the input boolean that is stored in the storage, you actually don't ever reload those. Because if any input boolean that is loaded from storage originally, when you add or remove an input boolean that is stored in storage, it doesn't remove all of them from the Home Assistant and adds them back. It just adjusts the one that was updated. With YAML, we cannot offer this because we don't know which entity maps to which entity. So we could do it for ones with IDs, but this is something that we still need to look into.
Right.
So yeah, this is actually YAML is in the way. Like if everything was in storage, it would be a lot easier.
No problem. Yeah, makes sense. Shelly devices are now being directly added into Home Assistant. I know Pete from last week will be excited to hear about this. And I know, Paulus, you've got some Shelly devices there. So they've now got a native integration with Home Assistant?
Yeah, so Shelly reached out to us not so long ago, and they were like, hey, we see that a lot of Home Assistant users like the product, and, can we share a discount code in the subreddit of Home Assistant? And I was like, sure. I mean, people love cheaper products, and it's very popular. And I was like, hey, but shouldn't we just have a more official partnership? Shouldn't we just collaborate because we're so well aligned? For people that don't know, these Shelly devices, they're original ones, I guess, the relays are these small boxes that you put behind your original light switch, and it will turn your original light switch smart, in that it can, through Wi-Fi, it can turn your light on and off as if you had pressed the switch. And the way your light switch then starts working is that, normally it's if it's up, it's on, and down is off. And now it's just, whenever you change it direction, it will change the light to the other, on or off.
State. Right.
So it's, it works kind of similar as sometimes you have a light where you have two switches connecting the same light.
Yeah.
And when you have that, the switches itself don't represent anymore if the light is on or off. You just know that if you toggle the switch, the light will toggle as well. So Shelly does that, but with a single switch and then Wi-Fi behind it that can also control it.
Yeah.
But the reason why, this is not new, or the reason Shelly are so popular is it comes out of the box with a local API. It comes out of the box with MQTT support as well, so it can push everything to MQTT. But it's also possible to flash them. So they are actually based on the ESP8266 chip that I also mentioned earlier that we've been using for our tag scanners.
Yeah.
And so you can actually put your own custom firmware on this. And so you can put ESP Home on these devices, or you can put Tesmoda on it, which are both very popular firmware as open source that you can put on this. And then you can run all the custom code in the world that you want. So yeah, now that we are... So they sent me one of each of all of their devices, and they were like, well, can we, how can we get this better integrated into Home Assistant? So we started looking, and the way we're integrating it now is that we just natively support their firmware that comes when you buy it. So this is the official Shelly firmware. Yeah. So because of course Tesmoda and ESP Home have their own integrations in Home Assistant, so we don't need to support those. So this is just Shelly, and it used to be that people, to integrate into Home Assistant, had to use MQTT.
Yeah.
But Shelly also comes with an optional cloud to, for example, link up with Google directly. And so Shelly's, because the ESPs are not too powerful, so they cannot do MQTT and do the Shelly cloud for Google. So people were like, well, if I want to use Google, but I want to get it in Home Assistant, I have to do I have to sacrifice Google, and they didn't want that, and so that's no longer necessary now, because we can integrate with Shelly without requiring MQTT. And it also means that it will be easier to set up Shellys, because the moment you start Home Assistant, we just find your Shellys and we say, hey, you want to set up your Shelly? You click yes, 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 and then all your Shelly devices are in Home Assistant.
Nice.
And this doesn't require a Shelly cloud or anything like that. It's all local.
No. Yeah.
Perfect.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so we don't support all the features of all the Shelly devices yet.
Yep.
But there's already, because Shelly is so popular within the community, there's already been like 3 other developers that stepped up to help like adding this all to Home Assistant now.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, it's funny because Shelly kind of, I don't know, to me at least, kind of came out of nowhere, right? It's just, we just hear a little bit, hey, Shelly, I'm using this. And I was like, oh, that's cool.
Everything was sewn off, and then bam, Shelly's here,
and
right?
then now you just, exactly. I'm hearing more Shelly than I am sewn off, right?
Yeah, the one thing I really like about Shelly, besides, of course, the custom firmware that is just supported out of the box, right? Like there's just a hole in the case where you can just put the pins for like flashing the chip. Mm-hmm. But the other thing is that it's made in the European Union, and it has all the certifications for safety of the European Union. So, because you're running, I'm in Europe right now, and you're running 230 volts through this kind of device, right? And so, if the quality control is shitty, it will just burn down your house.
Yeah,
yeah. Especially when you're putting these inside walls and stuff, right?
Yeah, like the heat and all that stuff.
Yeah, well, that's actually one of my biggest things too. The reason why I use certified products is because, again, if something does happen, my home insurance isn't going to cover anything, because they're going to be like, well, who asked you to do this?
Right.
So it's I think that's a big one. So and at that price, I think that's a great
right. Well,
great bargain.
Yeah, we actually didn't mention the price, but their basic one switch goes for like €9.
Yeah.
Which with the current inflation rate is like $25 or something.
Yeah,
no, I don't know.
Crazy.
It's,
I think it's like,
you would think, right?
And they sell in the US for a bit more because it has to be imported. I think the US price is like starts at $16 or $18, top of my head.
Yeah, still very cheap.
It's very cheap.
Not bad at all. Yeah, compared to like 60 or.
Right, and I think if you own a house, you want something like Shelly, because smart lights are just not the solution. Because if it means that you can no longer use the light switch, and then besides every normal light switch that you're not allowed to use, you're going to put like a smart light switch that works with Philips Hue, that's just weird, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so
Agreed.
if you can make your existing light switches smart, then you have the best of both worlds.
Totally. All right. Next up, Flow by Moen. I know this one's not as big of an integration. It's probably a smaller thing, but I personally love environmentals and just that kind of thing, right? So it's another water shutoff valve that Moen, who's in North America, they're fairly large, I think, that they have. So, if your water main, let's say you have a leak detector somewhere and you put that in there and it can shut off your water main for you. That's kind of nice.
I bet you're still regretting when your water main broke and you...
I actually looked at exactly this, but then my plumber was coming sooner than I could get one of these. So, and I wasn't going to be letting my water main just leak everywhere for longer. So I didn't get it. But yeah, that's actually why I know about this exact product.
Well, they say that like, if you look at like home damage, right? Like water leakage is the biggest one.
Of course.
It's not fire, right?
Of course.
Yeah, it's water. Yeah.
It's water leakage and sewage backing up or whatever happens quite often too.
Yeah. Once things get molding and stuff, then it's just
you're done at that point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Something that I haven't played with yet, but sounds really awesome, is a native Mac app for Home Assistant.
Yeah, I actually played with it.
Oh, is it good?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well done. Next topic.
It works. It works. It
does what it says on the box.
Yeah. It's you don't have to fire up the browser. It's there.
No, but I think what's really cool about this is not per se the browser. That's just okay, right? Like you can install like the UI also as an app with Chrome or Edge. No, but the really cool part that it unlocks is the automations, because it sends the sensors from your MacBook to Home Assistant. So a few of the sensors that are really useful is is a camera in use? So for example, you could have it so that when you start your camera, because you start a call, it will automatically put the lights on, so like to illuminate your head correctly. Or
And for people working in
when
ISO on Zoom calls, that's an amazing automation. You can have like a red light to tell everyone you're in a Zoom call, right?
Yeah.
Don't talk to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the same thing also is like, when we lock or unlock your Mac. So you could say, if I unlock my Mac and I don't, so if I lock my Mac and I don't unlock it within 5 minutes, turn off the lights in the room.
Right.
For example.
Yep.
Right.
And so this is just super cool. And you know, this already existed for Windows. For Windows, there's an application or a service, it has no UI, called IoT Link, and it can send all this kind of sensory information from Windows to MQTT, and then you can pull it into Home Assistant as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very nice. Well, I'm going to have to download that now. I do like the sounds of that.
Yeah.
Some breaking changes. There's too many in this release. It's 0.115. Too many. Like, take a look at the release notes.
There's been a ton of features added, so obviously there might be a couple of things that don't work as you would expect. So, all right. So, questions for Paulus and from Paulus. So you put out a tweet. You put out a tweet earlier, and I saw that right before I went to bed, and I was like, "Oh, this is gonna be good." Where Paulus said, "Hey, what are questions he can ask us?" So, we'll do both. So, us to you and you to us. So, we'll start. So,
okay.
State of the Union this year, is it happening? What's the deal there?
Yeah, so it is happening, but it's going to be online.
Okay.
So obviously the situation doesn't allow us to meet with large groups.
For sure.
And so I think also, in the last 2 years that we've done it, I've noticed that there's more people watching online than are actually there in person. Like last year, I think we had 150 people, which is super cool, right? Yeah. But we don't have to couple that to a State of the Union. We could also organize a meetup and then stream the State of the Union online or these kind of things.
Yeah.
But I'm actually looking forward to doing it online. I have to say we haven't started yet. So first the birthday, then the State of the Union, and then
generally around November, I think you do them.
Yeah, we do them in November. But I think what's going to be very nice is that it will allow us to have more speakers, right? Like in the past, it used to be me, then it was me and Pascal. And, there's so many people working on Home Assistant. There's so many people using Home Assistant or contributing in various ways. And it'd just be cool to hear from more people than, just me and Pascal. And being online allows this. And I think, GitHub had a pretty nice format when they did like a conference earlier this year, where pretty much, every speaker was like 10 minutes. Just their topic, their thing, and then just move on. And it'd be nice to have like such kind of a lineup.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna work on and we'll see what comes out of it. So you'll
That's
hear
awesome.
more about it. But it will be online.
Yeah, it's good to hear.
Wicked. Almost Apple keynote, right? Like, hey, okay, this guy's got 10 minutes. He's gonna talk about phones. Go, right? Whatever. So
yeah, how do you know we're working on a Home Assistant phone?
That's right. That's right. You heard it here first.
So, and I guess going along with that, you've obviously got more speakers. We've got more people working at Nabu Casa. How's the future of Nabu Casa going? Have you got any grand plans for this year that you've come out?
Well, if I had grand plans, I wouldn't tell them, of course. Like, they'll be like...
Why not? We're all friends, yeah?
Yeah, sure. Right. But that would be at the State of the Union or something. No, there's... So right now, we're growing, and we hired someone also to help with the hardware side, with the operating system side, right? So that's where we've had some workload issues in the past where Pascal was really overloaded.
Yeah.
Right now we're not looking to expand, mainly also because I think it's just we're living in risky economic times. The economy is still going up, but I don't trust it, and so. I'm an employer now where there's people that trust me that their paycheck comes, and the worst thing that could happen is that I would have to let someone go because we can't afford it, and then we're not planning on growing right now, and we'll have to see how these things evolve. We just keep doing what we're doing. I think the way it is set up, the way we're just all working on Home Assistant, and Home Assistant is getting better, like so much, right? Like all the time. It's kind of wild. So I think, why change a winning formula?
Yeah. Hey, fair enough.
That's it. Yeah.
I mean, kind of along the same lines, Paulus, for Home Assistant specifically, right? Again, is the focus still on simplifying, getting more advanced features in, that kind of thing? And really, where are we before we get to that 1.0, quote unquote?
Oh, I knew this was going to come.
Not to put you on the spot.
Yeah. I know. Last year I said I expect us to hit 1.0 in like the first half of 2020.
Yeah,
didn't happen. I think that, I don't know. So what makes a 1.0 and what does it mean for people when it's 1.0? Does it mean that we're no longer beta software? Like, where are we in the beta cycle then? And I think that, obviously we're still making it easier, and I think that we're not yet at the level that it's easy enough that people can like completely install it and like never ever have to touch YAML or command line, right? Because that's the goal, is that we have this, we call it you have standard mode, you have advanced mode, and in standard mode you don't, it would just be like a UI product only, right? And so you should be able to, we've added a lot of features to support this in this year, right? There's been like save mode, for example, just to make sure that even if your configuration gets super borked, we will still always at least get a UI going. We've added like recovery of failed databases. So a broken database will no longer stop Home Assistant from starting up.
Right.
We do more maintenance on the database to kind of keep it running more smooth and make sure that it gets like trimmed down if it's too big. But on the other hand, we're also just keep evolving our automations, right? Like we've added so many automation features here that also allow our advanced users that just want to write advanced automations to really like empower them and just do all the cool stuff that they want to do. I think we'll keep doing both, and at some point I think we'll be at a level where we're like, okay, now it's easy enough, and boom, we're gonna tag 1.0. But I don't know, I don't want to give timelines anymore because it's not gonna work.
Which is fair. And
totally agree.
And I know there was a big push a while ago for stuff like Almond as an example, which is, hey, make me an automation that does blah blah blah, and it kind of does it, right? Is that still prevalent? Is that still like are those still kind of the focuses that you and that core team has? Or
I think one of the things where I want to move towards is just to make the common tasks super simple to do. So there's just a bunch of automations that we know people would probably want if they have certain things. So for example, if you have a smoke detector, you probably want to get notified when it detects smoke.
Yeah.
Right? If if you have presence detection and lights, maybe you want the lights to automatically turn on the living room. Right? These are things that we shouldn't have people, we have amazing building blocks, but these building blocks are still, you need to be able to grasp what the system can do, and then you have to build it. And if almost every user is building the same automation, then why isn't that not just a toggle?
Right.
Notify me when like batteries are low, for example. It's not there. And so everybody builds their own solution to this. Well, this could be solved in a way. And so I think that's where we have a lot of, I kind of always think about it building kind of like apps on top of our building blocks. Like, because the tag integration, you could do, this is a great example, you could do everything without the tags front end, right? You could go to the DevTools, listen to the events, you can create automations, but that's all cumbersome. And people have to open many tabs and kind of look around.
Sure.
And so by bringing it all together, that's great. And I think, there's some, another thing where I think, we can do better with Home Assistant is just how much energy is your house using, and help you to lower the energy usage of your house. So for example, hey, you have the heater or the AC on and your door is open. Like, hey, let me just notify you that you probably want to close your door or turn off the AC.
Yep, totally.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So I think that's where we have a lot of possibility to make a lot of things easier.
Yeah.
And I think, we've added variables to automations now. And I think one of the steps we want to build on top, so sorry, I'm just like looping back now, is that we want to build this thing called templated automations, where this is not templates in the normal sense of templates, but more like if we have variables that we can describe. For example, this automation needs a device tracker or a person as input, and it needs a light as like a controllable entity. Then we could like create an automation that if that person is home, we can turn on the light. But of course, you could change the inputs, and so you can have multiple instances of a single automation.
Right.
And so all of a sudden, you could create a super advanced automation in YAML that is purely controlled by the inputs that people put in. And that would like, put our automation sharing on steroids.
Yeah.
Because you just have like, we can make the inputs, we can make it very advanced. For example, you can say multiple entities in the person domain, or multiple lights or areas of lights as output, right? Like this is you can make it as advanced as possible. But in the end, for the user, like the standard user, they would just get these prepackaged automations, and they just have to pick lights and people, and it's set.
Right.
So, if you think about like where do we want to go, making it easier, this is like one of the paths that I think we should explore.
Yeah. No, that sounds really exciting, I think. So
yeah.
And Sander on Twitter has asked, and this one's directed at you, Paulus, I'm interested to hear about how it is to make a living from an open source product you've created. I see many other open source products struggling with this. So, how does that feel? Like you've done the dream, right? Created something, given it away for free, and made a living from it.
Yeah, no, it is. So it is the dream, but it's also. Let me just make it clear. This is the dream, right? This is awesome, and like it's like my baby that is now supporting myself and others, and like helping so many people automate their homes. But it's also sometimes pretty, tricky, because with open source, a lot of my collaborators are around the world, different time zones. But even if I'm in the same country, I work, 9 to 5 ish. But the people that are volunteering for Home Assistant, they work in the evenings because that's when they are off.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it means that a lot of conversations I'm having is outside of like my office hours. So it was actually, right now I'm in Europe, but when I was in the US, it was actually easier to talk to Europeans because their evening in Europe is then during my workday in the United States.
Right.
Yep.
And I think the other thing that is like, so this is kind of a challenge because it just means, if you ever notice how often we're online, it's just like, well, we're just talking to our friends. I mean, this is also our hobby became our work. So it's also that's like, these are our friends. But I think the biggest challenge is to like, how do you turn it off? Like, how do you stop working? Because then if you stop working, you start automating your house and then you're back at working.
Yeah.
And I think the other challenge, this is just open source in general, is that when you're a developer in a normal company, you're shielded behind like product managers and customer support, and they will like get all the beatings, right? And for here, it's just people complain directly to us.
Yeah.
And they complain at every step. So if we're discussing, potential features in an architecture issue, people will chime in from all over the world to like give their opinion, even if they don't like fully understand it or whatever. And then this happens at every step. Like we're prototyping, you get like random people commenting on your work. You're like building it, then it's not according to this how this one person wants it, or you should do it differently. And so at every step, we always get all this feedback.
Yeah. Which is also a good thing. Which is, you're doing the right thing or the wrong thing for whenever, right?
Right. But it can also be very tiring because, like,
of course,
not everybody is always aware of all the different things that like we have like taken into account, for example.
Yeah.
And of course, to write everything down, which probably should happen, but it's also a lot of work. right? That's where you get these enterprise, everybody has to be accountable, so you just keep writing reports about reports just to be like, make sure it's written down somewhere.
Yep.
But no, I am living the dream. And if I look at like other projects that are kind of struggling and like to finding like this balance between like, people supporting, I mean, the things that are driving Home Assistant is that we make, Home Assistant is for users, right?
Yeah.
We are not an open source project to help you make better forms, to get input for your application, your enterprise application, right? We are directly facing consumers, which is also sometimes difficult because obviously consumers are also, they don't have all the technical domain knowledge to use the product, right? So that's why we're focusing on making it easier. And I think Nabu Casa is an addition to Home Assistant, right? Like you don't need Nabu Casa. Like the technical people can do everything themselves.
Sure.
Right? Like a lot of people will still subscribe to support the development, right? And make sure that like if security incidents happen, like there's a fast response or like hot fixes are like there's a good turnaround time. But I think also there we did a good job in saying like, we're not like if this then that, where we just say, well, you can only have 3 automations in Home Assistant, otherwise subscribe, whatever, right? Like it wouldn't work.
Right.
It has to be, when Nabu Casa came around, we offered something that wasn't there yet. Like it's an addition.
Yeah.
And so I think that is just, that's also really helpful. Like it's the way we've structured it.
Yeah. No, I agree.
You still kept it open. You haven't restricted people. Like if you want to use the Amazon Echo, you have to go through Nabu Classic. That's not a thing, right? Like
no. In fact, it's been like our power to not have done this. Like it's in our benefit of everybody because the code that processes commands from Google and Alexa sits inside Home Assistant. So it doesn't matter if this command comes through Home Assistant Cloud or through your manual setup of Alexa or Google, it all hits the same code base. And it means that it doesn't matter who adds to Alexa or Google or who fixes bugs, everybody benefits.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Which is, of course, this is how open source works. So this is great.
No, which is awesome. Exactly. So did you have any for us? I know this is a little longer of a podcast, but since you put the feelers out there, let's hear them. I know Phil answered one, but we can re-answer it for folks that may not be on Twitter.
Yeah, I'm gonna get that one question because I think that was the only one that really came out. Like most questions were still for me.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, is it hard to come up with a good subject without a fresh release to talk about?
No, not really. I mean, we're blessed enough to have, I think, enough people mailing in and kind of giving us feedback and that kind of thing that, last time we had a really good chat with Pete, right? And just to say, hey, listen, this is what we're doing, blah, blah, blah. And we also have our spotlight episodes that we do, which is, again, it's mostly around a specific topic or a specific facet of Home Assistant or home automation. So that's that helps, right? So we can always fill in the blanks there a little bit. So typically those are in addition to the regular episodes, but as Phil kind of pointed out on Twitter, we don't that's extra time that it's just like anytime Phil and I sit down, we're like, okay, we're gonna do this, we gotta talk about this, we're gonna do all of that. We end up not doing it.
We have our backlog. We have people. So many suggestions have come in for our spotlight episodes. It's just that we have to plan them out and
do them.
And I think also last week's talking to Pete, like there wasn't a struggle to get any details out. I think we got off ended the recording and it was like Pete goes, "Oh, I've still got to tell you about this automation and that automation." I'm like, sorry, Pete, we're right out of time. We're already longer than a normal episode.
That's right. So yeah, it's but again, it kind of goes back to kind of what we were talking about earlier, right? I think Phil and I both enjoy doing this, and I think our listeners also, and the folks we have on the show also, really they enjoy home automation and stuff, and that passion really comes out. So which is awesome.
Yeah, and we're very lucky for everyone that comes on.
Absolutely.
Well, it shows. I mean, this is already episode 73.
Right.
Which is like crazy. That's a lot of episodes.
I know. Phil and I always talk about it too. It's like, especially in the New Year's and stuff like that, or it's like when we hit like 50 episodes or something, we're like, wow, 50 episodes? People still want to talk to us? That's cool.
That's been good.
Right. So
yeah, I always like it because it's like, it's on a fixed schedule. So I know like, oh, the new podcast is going to drop. I can like,
exactly.
Time. Yeah. I must say, I have more difficulty finding time for podcasts now because like, you're not outside that much.
Sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. I haven't listened to podcasts because I don't commute to work anymore. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Same. But hopefully people are still making time.
Doing chores.
Well, judging by our emails, they are.
Yeah, that's true.
That's good.
Yeah.
Well, Paulus, thank you so much. It has been, I think this is down in the history books as our longest episode that we will ever release. It has been a massive release. I think congratulations to you for 7 years of Home Assistant. Congratulations to everyone that's gone into this release.
Yeah.
It is it's a milestone release, definitely. Some great new features. So yeah, and thanks for taking so much time out of your day to talk to us about it.
Yeah, no, awesome. Thank you very much. And also, thank you guys for like doing this amazing podcast. Like, I truly like appreciate it.
Oh, for sure.
Like, it's really good.
Thank you.
I enjoy listening to it.
Thank you. Cheers.
Hey, cheers.
Cheers, guys. If you want to share your Home Assistant journey or come on as a guest, reach out to us at feedback@hasspodcast.io. That's HASS podcast.io.
The Home Assistant podcast is hosted by Phil Hawthorne and myself, Rohan Karamandi. For links to topics that we discussed today, check out our show notes on hasspodcast.io.